Ladies, gentlemen, fellow Bat family out there, we just got a new trailer from San Diego Comic-Con's Penguin panel, and I am here to break it down for you. We've also got comments from Matt Reeves himself on the panel about the Penguin, the Batverse overall, the perspective on Batman in the Penguin. Matt Reeves also making confirmations and affirming some things about the Batman Part 2, and more, of which I will be sprinkling throughout this video, so I really do recommend staying tuned for all of it. Also, bear with me with regards to San Diego Comic-Con stuff. There's a lot to cover. But man, this trailer really does pull out all the stops. I mean, we get more grit, and I mean like true grit and grime from the gang war with the rise of Oz, Sofia, Falcone, and scenes within Arkham Asylum, references to Dark Victories, the Hangman killer. There's a bunch. So go ahead, like this video, show your support for the Batverse content here on the channel, and of course, subscribe for more videos just like this. So let's dive into this. So at the very beginning of the trailer, as you can see here, it picks up with Oz putting on a record and dancing with his mother, played by Deirdre O'Connell. I absolutely love this, by the way, for a bunch of reasons. But firstly, I guess you could say because all while this is a story about Oz's rise to power, and that will involve, again, you know, a lot of grit and grime of the crime in Gotham City. But I love that we're getting more insight into who the man is and a bit of his backstory. Now, we already know that we're getting flashbacks in this series, and we're going to get more into that a little bit later, with even some Carmine Falcone flashbacks. But we already had this teased from Entertainment Weekly, if you didn't know already. Farrell was eager to dig into aspects of Oz that we didn't get to see in the Batman, from flashbacks to his childhood, to his current relationship with his mentally disturbed mother, and we heard from a report quite a long time ago now from the Illuminati that she may have the condition of Lewy body's dementia. And so, you know, just ultimately here, seeing Oz share this moment with his mother here right at the beginning of the trailer, it really allows us to delve into this character's psychology a bit more. We've known ever since the Batman released that Oz has always been underestimated. That's probably one of the main things about the character. But despite what others see in him, he has a real fire inside and a real ambition to prove otherwise. And you can see this relationship he has with his mother has likely spurred him on since childhood to be something, like make something of himself. We hear her say, "You promised me, Oswald." And he's like, "I know, Ma. I deserve a better life." And he's like, "I'm working on it." And later on in the trailer, we see the dance and conversation continue with Oz's mother saying, "This city is meant to be yours, sweetheart. What are you gonna do to get it?" Now, you can really tell that, to be honest, Oz has probably grown up with his mother having had big expectations for him, and as a result, you can just kind of tell that it's been rooted into his psyche, and if anything, only further reinforced by those thinking nothing of him throughout his years in life. And thus, I guess this combination of factors propels him to stop at nothing to achieve that. And now we all know who his biggest mascot has been in driving him to make that happen. And so from this scene onwards, we get to see Oz's initial stages in his, I guess you could say, crucible ahead. And my God, this could be one heck of a crucible, with him getting the sledgehammer out of his car, walking throughout the streets of Gotham, a club full of Gotham citizens dancing, more on that a little bit later, with a voiceover of his perspective on the world and how it isn't set up for the honest man to succeed. And that should be the American dream right there, you know, a beautiful story with a happy ending. But that ain't the way the world works. And again, just as said, I love these lines here because it shows that Oz is a man who obviously does know right from wrong, but with his experience in life, he quite simply knows that to get somewhere in the world that he's lived in, which is, you know, quite a different world from maybe what a lot of other people have lived in, from seeing the legendary Rex Calabrese ruling Gotham when he was younger, his neighborhood throwing a whole parade for Rex Calabrese, the mob boss back in the day, who looked after people. He's wanted that own adoration, but he's also seen with his own experience growing up to be eventually Falcone's right-hand man, having likely seen countless honest men, if you will, trying to succeed and perhaps getting caught up with the wrong people, to seeing their end, perhaps even being commanded to even deliver their end himself by, let's just say, Falcone, to then everyone thinking he'll be nothing. Well, Oz knows that's not the way the world works, or in his world. And so we see him understanding this bottom line truth that his world revolves around, and it's symbolized here with him basically gutting this man with his knife. Another scene after that of him firing multiple rounds and chucking a body away in this rundown kind of post-Riddler flood iceberg lounge. Now, sure, these initial teasers of kills from Oz, they could be anyone from any part in the story, but regardless, it highlights the commentary very well. It's a nasty business. And in this is the way things just, I know I keep saying it, but it's the way things work for him. And this act here, like, symbolizing that, is barely an appetizer for what's to come. And I also just love the editing in the trailer at this moment, as after all of this, we get a crack from Oz laughing, saying, "Not that I'm complaining." For then immediately a scene to be followed of him just spraying bullets. Despite this perhaps being an uncomfortable truth once upon a time in Oz's life, he's become so entrenched in this way of life over the years that I think you could say that one would eventually learn to revel in it, like an appetite is gained. But also something to pay attention to here, and what I like and how the trailer got into it a bit more, is that we see that he's saying this to Renzi Feliz's Victor Aguila, I believe the character's name is, who is kind of like Penguin's Oz to Carmine now. He's got his own protege, and I think this will be another angle to help obviously tell Oz's story, psychologically speaking, through the character study that we'll be getting. You know, Oz is taking this kid off the streets under his wing, initially through gunpoint by the looks of it, in almost possibly a way in where he could have been stealing parts from Oz's car, and in a similar way to Jason Todd with Batman, but Pengy overlooks it, to then being his driver, just learning the ropes. And even in a way, Victor's experience could almost replicate that of the audience's. He's going to be thrown into this world head first, which is perfectly demonstrated by scenes later on in the trailer where we hear Oz say a few things as things get very dangerous and violent. Victor more or less looks terrified, and Oz looks like he's reveling in it. He's been here before, and he says, "You feel alive, Vic? Huh? Feel your heart beating?" And then he just continues to laugh as they're in a little bit of a car chase scene or something like that. But we also have Victor saying, "I got ambition. I can help you." And I really do think that this hits a spot for Oz. Now, this isn't me saying or calling Oz remarkably sentimental. However, when Victor says a line like that, he's probably seeing a bit of himself in Victor, a man proclaiming with earnest that he has this ambition and how he can help him. That was probably Oz once upon a time. Now, as the Penguin's crucible continues, Victor, as the new driver to Oz, the new right-hand man, drives him over to what I think is the Falcone residence, and we hear Johnny Vitti, played by the great Michael Kelly, saying, "Penguin, you waltzing in here like you mean something." Now, this is obviously another show of everyone who remains in the Falcone crime syndicate looking at Oz as if he's nothing. Like, who do you think you are? And if anything, what the hell are you doing here? We're in the middle of a gang war. But Oz obviously wants to get involved, and if anything, probably wants to hear what their play is. As we know, he wants to screw them over. We're going to get into that even more in just a second. But Oz does say, "Carmine Falcone's dead. If we don't protect what is ours, we just look weak." That's probably in relation to the drugs on the streets. If they lose that, it kind of doesn't have their position so fortified, so there's probably lots of stuff like that happening in the gang war. He continues to say that the streets are talking. They know there's only one man big enough to run this city. Now, I don't think this is necessarily him putting his name forward, but he might just be playing a bit of a long game, which is when Milos Grappa announces the arrival of Sofia Falcone. And he says, "Oz, you remember Carmine's daughter?" And I love her entrance here. She's like, "Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt." And we have Oz saying, "Sofia, I thought you were still at Arkham." "No, I've been rehabilitated." And the way she says that, she's like, "No, I've been rehabilitated." She just, I don't know, is something kind of unhinged about the way she delivers that line. But yeah, we're going to get into that because, guys, there's some awesome stuff that they're injecting into this series from the comics. And I have a bit of a, theory on a bit of a twist that they could be doing. Now, we also do see some scenes in between this of her time spent at Arkham. So these are flashbacks, as Sofia was put away in Arkham around 10 years ago, as it says 2012 on some of those newspapers, and that lines up to 10 years ago because the Batman was set during 2022. This is where things get pretty savage within Arkham. We see her getting into a fight with one of the inmates, and it looks vicious. She gave me vibes, honestly, of the Sofia from Dark Victory, because that comic version is actually a force to be reckoned with. But it's interesting to note how everyone is just standing there observing, the doctors and even the guards probably just letting this happen, perhaps just really showcasing how dodgy Arkham State Hospital is in the Batverse. And, I think that's the case. I mean, look at the walls of Arkham here. They're borderline disgusting. I mean, with what looks to be blood dripping down from that kind of higher level observation area where there's bars. Perhaps somebody's head got cracked against one of those and it just kind of trickled down to the lower level where Sofia was fighting. Now, Arkham is just like a rundown, nasty, not so funded place. We got a bit more insight into that in the Ridley Year One comic written by Paul Dano. I've done breakdowns on that on the channel if you want to go check it out. And honestly, all that's left for me to say is that I just can't wait to get a peek in there, given that we've only really so far had like scenes in the interview rooms with the Riddler and the unseen Arkham prisoner, which is basically the Joker. He just hasn't been given the name the Joker yet in universe. Now, having said that, I wouldn't go and expect to see Barry Keoghan's Joker eating lunch in this room or anything like that. It would be great if we got a nod or an Easter egg or just a little reference of any kind, but we're just gonna have to wait and see. But it's safe to say, though, that Sofia Falcone has been through the ringer with her experience there. This has likely only further driven her to want to get back out into Gotham to obtain what is hers, especially as she may have been put away falsely, as in framed. So what do I mean there? Because I know a lot of you are going to be like, hey, but Boba, the Hangman killer in Dark Victory is Sofia Falcone. And yes, you're right. But in reality here, ladies and gentlemen, I have a theory. And it is just a theory, so bear that in mind. In how, though, even yes, indeed, in the Batman comic Dark Victory, Sofia Falcone is the Hangman killer. But I do expect a little bit of a twist here. So let's briefly get into this. So as I always say, on this channel, with adaptations not copy and pasting from the source material into the adaptation at all times. They like to innovate, maybe do some things new, maybe mix things up a bit, do a bit of a spin. I think that the Penguin show may very well do a bit of a spin. And my theory is that she actually perhaps took the fall for these crimes of the Hangman killer for her brother, the real Hangman killer in this iteration, Alberto Falcone, of whom we actually see tapping on the Arkham interview glass window, likely after going to visit his sister in a flashback, perhaps, may I even suggest, distraught after she took the fall for him. And maybe he's just a bit upset about that, but it's just the way it went down. Now, I say this for a few reasons, just to expand on this here. You may have heard me briefly mention this before, but with the dialogue in previous trailers, Sofia refers to her comeback as, "I refuse to let these old men push me aside again. So I'm going to take from them now, and I'm going to force them to their knees." And she's talking about the actual people, the old men within that of her own crime family, the Falcone crime syndicate. Hence why she evidently forges an alliance with the Penguin. Now, I think it's possible that even though Alberto Falcone was the holiday killer in The Long Halloween, I know lots of people like to debate that, and how even though, this is the interesting thing with adaptations, not copy and pasting, so even though there's been a bit of a Dark Victory Hangman killer comic adaptation that has taken place in Matt Reeves' The Batverse's past here, evidently, that doesn't mean that The Long Halloween has. And if you don't know already, theory, Dark Victory chronologically takes place after the Long Halloween, so the Holiday Killer thread had already been resolved at that point in the comics. So, in conclusion to this theory, I think they're actually doing a bit of a mix and mash and a bit of a twist here in how there hasn't been in the past or won't be a Holiday Killer adaptation with Alberto Falcone in the Batverse. And if anything, as a bit of a side note, the Long Halloween probably influenced the kills that the Riddler did in the first movie. But except, I think that he's the one, Alberto Falcone is the one who strangled all of these victims, of whom, by the way, all of these victims were all women, of which is another difference from the Hangman Killer's victims in the Dark Victory comic. And out of protecting Alberto Falcone, the heir to the Falcone Don at the time in 2012, it may have been kept pretty hush-hush. And as Sofia Falcone said, the old men of the Falcone crime syndicate pushed her out and she took the fall because she's not the son. She's not the heir. She's maybe somebody who we can pin the crimes on. And by the way, I actually wouldn't even be surprised if a lot of those in the Falcone crime syndicate wasn't actually even aware of this, and she did it because her father asked her to, like personally, and it was maybe kept between them and maybe one or two others. But I wouldn't be surprised if Oz himself didn't even know. So that is just a theory, but you know, I really think something like this might happen. And again, this could be why Alberto, just to remind you, looks so distraught when he goes to visit his sister. I think that is a flashback scene. Combine that with just how infuriated Sofia must feel after all she's been through in Arkham at the cost of her brother and just the Falcone crime family. She means business now that she's bloody back. And regardless, there's one thing that we know for sure, and that is that she thinks that they, the old men and all those remaining in the Falcone crime family, think that she's broken, which is more dialogue in the previous trailer, and that they'll never allow her to obtain the power she wants, so she needs to ally with the Penguin in order to get it, and we see various scenes of them in this trailer together, even in a spot of danger at one point with Nadia Maroney's men pistol whipping Oz to the ground, which kind of leads me to the next part of this plan, the alliance. What do Oz and Sofia Falcone do next in order to tear down the Empire from the inside, as Oz says? Well, this makes sense that, you know, after Sofia and Oz both ally with each other, what else are they going to do in order to get support? Because they're going to need a bit of backup. Well, the next stop on the bus would be the very crime family that Falcone himself usurped after he ratted out the former mob boss, Salvatore. And that is indeed, obviously, Salvatore Maroni. So you can see here Nadia Maroney standing in the corner, and it's likely that they're going to appeal to her to join forces, and we know that they even go to Blackgate Penitentiary to speak to Salvatore Maroni himself, who's been locked up there for the past 20 years. And he asks Oz, what is it that he's really after? And Oz talks about how he's going to tear their empire down from the inside out, meaning the Falcone Empire, because, you know, they are still technically the top dogs, even though there's a power vacuum, but they're struggling, and this is why it's such an opportune moment. And a way of doing this could be what he says next. Whoever controls the drug business controls the streets, and I'll be running the whole damn trade. So if we pair what is said here with other scenes in the trailer, we see Oz and Sofia go into this kind of drug warehouse where they seem to be growing like some kind of psilocybin, shrooms or whatever, and so perhaps they're securing more locations for the drug business, and as a result are disrupting the Falcone crime family's ability to control that themselves, and thus losing their grip on the streets. And the Maronis could be very, very, very helpful in enforcing that. And I also wonder if, given that we're seeing Penguin here in the same white suit he was wearing and when he went to meet Nadia Maroney with Sofia, if this could actually be the Maronis Club as they're kind of standing here together overlooking the dance floor. Just similar to how, you know, there was the Iceberg Lounge and Falcone had the 44 Below. So yeah, it will be interesting to see some other like crime family locations. Now, Oz, speaking of being a dangerous game, may run into a bit of trouble, as we we do see him getting apprehended by some GCPD officers at one point, but I don't think that's gonna last very long because, you know, he's gonna be the Kingpin. Now, we can't forget that there was that rumor which turned into a confirmation from Mark Strong's trainer that he trained him for his role in the Penguin series, and for the longest time, it was rumored that he'd be playing Carmine Falcone. So basically a recast here, perhaps due to scheduling conflicts, is what I've heard behind the scenes in terms of how they couldn't actually get John Turturro to reprise the role. Now, at San Diego Comic-Con, as some of you know, they were doing a Penguin Iceberg Lounge experience, where they actually simulate the Iceberg Lounge, you go down into it, and it was really, really awesome. But they were also showing little newspapers, news reports of as of the end of the Batman, such as this one here, thanks to Brian Particelli, saying murder of Carmine Falcone incites power struggle, and then there's that picture of him saying Carmine Falcone assassinated, and that's true because he was assassinated by the Riddler. Now, why are they showing a picture of him younger? You know, he's got more color to his hair compared to the John Turturro version that we saw in the Batman. Well, that's because we know that Carmine Falcone was just as much, if not more, of a recluse than Bruce Wayne was in Gotham City. There was even that line where he even says something like that to Bruce Wayne, and that's because there was an assassination attempt on his life when Bruce was very young, if you remember, and Thomas Wayne stitched him back up. So he's kind of been very, very low-key despite running everything in the criminal underbelly in Gotham for the next 20 years. But yeah, so that's probably the only photo that they actually have of him from many, many years ago. And many people are thinking that this is, as a result, Mark Strong's makeup and wig, if you will, for his role as Carmine Falcone. And I have to say at this point, that's probably a high likelihood of being the truth. And as a result, since we know we're getting flashbacks in this series, I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, the fact that they've cast Mark Strong as a recasted Carmine Falcone, I don't think they would waste that. So we might get into, I mean, hell, like, it'd be really cool if we get into the moment in where he ratted out Salvatore Maroni, and we could even see a younger version of them 20 years ago. Maybe this obviously ties into Oz's backstory because, hey, that's the whole point. But I'm thinking things are going that direction. Now, that's mainly the trailer and what I wanted to talk about there. But we did get other little tidbits of information from the Penguin panel, such as maybe even Batman being teased. I want to say don't get your hopes up, but they said, or Lauren LaFranc, the showrunner, said, the Batman's up high looking down on Gotham, and Oz is in the streets, in the grit and the grime. So you could look into this as that's them saying that basically maybe don't expect Batman so much in this show because Oz is in the grit and the grime of the streets, but Batman's like super busy with the lawlessness, the looting, the crime, and everything, that he's kind of up high looking down on everything going on in Gotham right now. Sure, getting involved, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee it, and maybe that's her, you know, kind of saying that they're kind of in separate places, or just Bruce is very busy doing vigilante things. But at the same time, you could also interpret it as that we could get perspectives of Batman looking, you know, down at Gotham. And I think it'd be really cool if we actually saw like criminal perspectives of that happening. Now, I have no doubt that we're going to get references to the Bat, possible commentary from criminals, you know, the various crime families. Maybe there's references to Batman helping out on news reports, but I don't know if we're going to actually see him. I really, really, really do hope so. This could be a little teaser and nod at that. We could get an appearance towards the end of the series, and if not, we could just maybe see, again, some criminal perspectives, but I would love to know your own ideas on that. And as for the Batman Part 2, now, it wasn't a lot, but we got something which was great hearing it from the horse's mouth, because we already heard from Andy Serkis that he said in an interview not so long ago that he heard that they are filming early 2025. And that was a great piece of news because it basically told me that all of the actors were informed that, hey, clear your schedule, don't commit to anything crazy because we're shooting. So it wasn't just Andy Serkis who would have heard that. It would have been basically everyone who's coming back to the Batman Part 2. So now Matt Reeves himself saying at the panel, as it says here, Matt Reeves confirms that the Batman Part 2 will begin filming in early 2025 and Colin Farrell will return as the events of the Penguin lead directly into the film. Now, shocker, shocker, Oz Cobblepot will be in the Batman Part 2 as the new Kingpin of Gotham City. I guess what I was hoping for with regards to more is that he might say that the script is done, but like we're still, you know, obviously shooting in early 2025, and that's not happening right now. We've got prep to do. He didn't even really say anything like that other than just confirming that things must be going swimmingly enough with the script progress for them to know that they will be shooting early next year. But there was also another cool little tidbit with regards to the actual concept of the Penguin being in the Batman Part 2, and actually this story not even being a show to begin with. So Matt Reeves said, "I had always thought it'd be a great thing to do, and what we were planning to do is for the next movie, we were going to take his character and we were going to make that kind of step. Because the whole thing, the first movie, as you know, ends where there's like a power vacuum in Gotham. And so the whole idea is, here's this guy, totally underestimated. Nobody really sort of thinks that he can do it, but meanwhile, he has this fire inside of him. And so at that moment, I thought, okay, well, we could do that at the beginning of the next movie, and now be a part of that journey." And then Dylan and I were talking, you know, because we were, as I said, I love the idea of finding a way to do shows with this world. And as that was happening, Casey Bloys and Sarah Aubrey said to us, "Hey, listen, you know, we really want a marquee character." And I was like, well, you know, we were going to do this thing for what happens in this kind of rise to power with the Penguin. And Casey was like, "That's a show, and we're doing it." So it's kind of nuts to imagine that you know, Oz Cobblepot's The Penguin Show, the whole 8-hour story that we're getting there was going to be really kind of condensed down to a story that was happening, you know, in the entrance of the Batman 2 movie. Because the Batman 2 was always going to pick up directly or a very, very short space of time after the Batman 1. That is so evident at this point. And so they were going to weave his crime story and Rise to Kingpin in that, all while simultaneously, I believe, doing another Rogues Gallery villain, because I've seen some people say that, oh, they were going to make Oz Cobblepot the Kingpin and main Rogues Gallery villain for the Batman Part 2. All while I totally understand that theory, I don't think that was ever the intention. It's just that, hey, like, we're now doing a show to bridge, you know, the first movie to the second movie, and that was just going to happen throughout the course of maybe some other crazy things happening in the second movie with another character and all these other things that we can throw at Batman to tell another story with whoever that Rogues Gallery character is going to end up being. Now, you could still add in theories of how technically Oz Cobblepot could still be one of the main threats in the Batman Part 2, with the Batman being a thorn in the Kingpin of Gotham Crime's side. And so you could argue that he could hire or like work with another Rogues Gallery villain in order to take the Batman out because he's just no good for business, if you know what I mean. That could be like a really organic thing, and for all we know, this could actually be where it might be going in some way, shape, or form. Because, you know, what if he hires a killer? What if he collaborates with someone like, I don't know, Hush, or, you know, Victor Zsasz, or I don't know. I'm just spitting out names, but you get like the direction I'm going in. Oz could be, and he will be, a much more stepped up character in Part 2. There's no way he couldn't be, being the new Kingpin. And obviously, with all of this gang war stuff going on, this will absolutely mightily concern Batman, and it will be a lot for him to deal with. So that's why, you know, things are picking up with a new status quo in Gotham, in the crime of Gotham, in the Batman Part 2. But just to like emphasize, I would be pretty damn surprised if we didn't get a whole new casted Rogues Gallery villain in Part 2. But that's not me saying that this new Rogues Gallery villain wouldn't, you know, have some kind of relationship with Oz Cobblepot. But who knows truly where this direction is going to go, but I am pretty damn excited for it. So after rambling for a long amount of time in this video, that is everything I've got to say with regards to the Batverse at San Diego Comic-Con 2024. New trailer, new little tidbits. The Batman 2 isn't cancelled. For crying out loud, how many times have I had to say that in the past? But maybe people will be a little bit more quiet about it now. Let me know any and all thoughts, all theories on everything that I said in this video down in that comment section. My eyes will be glued, and I'll be chatting with some of you down there. Also, just to let you know, I have posted my social media sentiments, if you will, for Batman Caped Crusader, because I've seen all 10 episodes. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, would really appreciate a like. Consider subscribing. I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Bat family in the next video. Goodbye.